Non-judgmental observation, seeing life for really and truly what it actually is. And when we talk about this topic of non-judgmental observation, I want you to think of a time where, maybe you did an exam, maybe your secondary school, any form of or stage in school, right? And you revised so hard for the exam, you spent so much time and effort going into it, and you thought to yourself, man, I'm gonna do so well in this thing. And you get the results back, and you see it wasn't really something, you didn't get the result that you intended, right? Maybe you passed, but you weren't really satisfied at all with it. And God forbid, maybe you even failed the exam, right? And what oftentimes happens when this does happen is the fact that we define ourselves by this experience. And what I mean by that is the fact that, we take this exam, right? And you begin to flick through the paper and you go through the questions and you see, man, how did I get this wrong? How did I get that wrong? And you begin to question yourself and you begin to say to yourself, man, you could have done way better than this. Come on, man, you're better than this, right? So it goes from this thing of questioning yourself with the paper, or questioning the paper, questioning your abilities concerning the exam, right? And what your mind often does is when you accept that, it takes it to the next level. And the next level is the fact that maybe, let's say it was a maths exam, and you say to yourself, you know what, maybe I'm just not good at maths. Clearly I spent all this time and effort revising for the exam, and I didn't even get a half decent result. I didn't even get the result I wanted. I think I'm just going to give up, right? So it takes it from that one exam to the next level, which is the topic per se, in this example, maths. And when you've again accepted that, your mind takes it to another level, which is, you start calling yourself a failure. You start saying, you know what, maybe because it was that exam that you failed, and you define yourself by that experience. And especially if it's been a repeated experience, again, when you expose yourself to any form of repeated experience, it's so much easier to define yourself by it, and you almost see it from a warped perspective, right? You don't really truly see it for what it actually is, right? Your mind has become so clouded because it's almost gotten used to this experience that it just judges it and labels it however it wants to, not for really and truly what it actually is, right? And this is the very reason why I'm talking about this thing of non judgmental observation. It's almost being able to find freedom from the known, to break free from the things that we're so used to and so accustomed to, and actually being able to see life and see results on whatever it might be for really what they truly are. And I'll even be honest, and this was even something that happened to me fairly recently, right? I had university assignment, and it was for a specific module that I had attended literally all the sessions for. Had put so much time and effort into the assignment, and then I got the results back, and I thank God I passed, but it was very much below the standard which I have for myself, right? And I think that was really what hurt the most, right? It's not even necessarily the result itself, but it's the fact that the result just doesn't align with the standard which I've set for myself. And throughout that whole time, there were so many questions running through my mind. It was like, you had attended all these sessions just to achieve this result, which is, again, far below our standard. It was kind of like, what was the point? It kind of almost felt like if I had just stayed home and kind of just kept up with everything from home, I probably could have still got the same result anyway. And it's just like we almost, see the results of the thing. And because there's so much emotion, yeah, and investment and time attached to it, it can be so easy to either just avoid it and pretend like it's not there. But again, that doesn't solve anything because it really is there and it did happen and it's real, right? Or we almost disregard the thing. How I was talking about in the example before, we go to that point where it's like, maybe this module, maybe this topic just isn't my thing. And we try and give more attention and focus to the other ones and disregard the one that we said isn't our thing. Well, the only issue with that is the fact that, again, once you've said in your mind, again, even the Bible talks about as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, right? Once you've conceived it and said that, you know what, this just isn't your thing, there's almost a mental switch that takes place, right? So for the other modules where you haven't said that, your mind's working, it's absorbing everything it needs to achieve success in the exams or whatever projects or you might be doing in life, right? But for that thing which you've kind of put to the side and avoided and run away from and said, you know what, it's just not your thing. What really happens with that is almost a mental switch, right? The switch goes from being on to being off, and it's like now everything that you needed to be successful in that thing is just off. It doesn't even want to take in what is needed because you've told yourself that this just isn't your thing. Well, your mind has absorbed that. And because again, this almost goes in line with self image or self imagery, because you said that what happens internally reflects externally, right? Because so everything that has happened internally says that, okay, this isn't your thing. So then on the external, that literally happens. So all you're really doing is just playing out what you've told yourself, right? So now we understand this. It's kind of like, why don't I, instead of using my mind to achieve the result that I don't desire, why don't I just use the mind that I've been graciously given by God, which is such a great gift, to actually achieve that which I want, that which I desire to achieve, right? And this is where non judgmental observation comes in. And this actually is from, again, a book I've been reading of recent called The Inner Game of Tennis, right? And what it actually talks about is the fact that, let's say I'm playing you guys in tennis that are watching, right? I'm serving and I'm getting straight aces. And for those that don't watch tennis, an ace is basically, again, my serve was either so good that you couldn't reach it, or even if you did reach it, you weren't able to get the ball back over to my side of the court, right? And obviously, I'm getting points from this. My points are going up. I'm winning the game, and you're losing the game, right? So what I see as good, you see as bad. And this is the concept is trying to get people to understand, is the fact that, when we begin to label these things in our mind, and again, this is done through our conscious mind, which the book labels as self one or says as self one, and self two is our unconscious mind, right? Or the subconscious mind, I should say, the subconscious mind. What really happens is the fact that when we begin to label these things again as good or as bad, well, in a game of tennis, what I actually see as good, you don't see as good if I'm playing against you. And the perspective is trying to get us to have is one of an umpire, right? If we truly have a fair, honest, and just umpire, he just watches the game, he observes the game for what it is, and he calls the points to whoever has the points and to whoever doesn't get the points, right? He's just observing the game really and truly for what it is, right? Yes, maybe in the case of, maybe me serving well against you guys, um, yes, maybe he observed that it was a well placed serve. Maybe he observed that there was a lot of power in the serve, right? But for an umpire, as he's just watching, he's able to actually gather the information, gather the data from the experience that he's observing or from the experience he's having, and actually begin to learn from that. Right. So if there was anyone that you were really going to speak to about why this person won the game instead of this person, it was really the umpire, because he'd be able to actually give you a fair and honest judgment of everything that has taken place in the game. And it's almost having this perspective on life that really and truly changes everything. Right. So again, in the case of my assignment, you know, if I were to just label it as even good, right? Let's say I had achieved more than I even expected or desired, right? And I labeled it as good. Something that can even happen with that is because we label it as a positive thing, we're so much so fixated on us having done well and we're so excited in that state of excitement that we don't actually even look at the feedback that allowed us to actually do so well, right? We don't actually learn from that experience what it was, that maybe it was our academic writing, maybe it was the references, all of these various and different things that cause us to achieve that result. We just we're just so fixated on having done well, we don't actually learn the necessary lesson. Again, if it in the case my case for that assignment, it wasn't necessarily a result which I wanted, right? Instead of being immature and avoiding it and pretending like it didn't happen, well, being mature and wanting to grow and improve consistently means being able to confront those very things that I might not have necessarily wanted, right? And as I confront it, I learn from the feedback, right, that I've been given. And instead of labeling it as this bad thing, I just see the feedback for what it is, right? Areas where for sure I could have improved, I could have done better, right? But again, it's feedback, right? It's telling me what I can do to improve and to achieve maybe that said desired result. An example the book gives, and again, this is a very, very drastic example, but it's one to help the reader to understand the power of non-judgmental observation, right? So we have three men in a car, they're driving, they're going to maybe a place, right? And we have someone crossing the road, and obviously the car stops, and the person crossing the road is a naked woman. I know it's crazy, right? So we have three people there. One of them is sees this almost as a good thing, right? He is so much so thinking lustful thoughts, thinking about what he could do with this woman, this, that, and the third, whatever it might be, right? We have another person who sees this from almost a pessimistic view of life, right? He's thinking to himself, man, like we just had people dressing half naked, we had people showing too much skin. Now we have people just being fully naked. I mean, this world is over, right? And then we have another person who sees this and he's just observing it for what it is, a naked person crossing the street, right? But something that he sees is that, wait, her eyes are closed, she's sleepwalking, right? So obviously he goes, he covers her with his blazer, he covers her, wakes her up, and obviously she wakes up. Right. Again, this being very drastic and the chance of this happening being almost zero. But it's to get you to understand the fact that when you non-judgmentally observe, when you don't label this thing as a bad thing and you don't label this thing as a good thing, you're able to actually see the intrinsic value. You're able to actually see the detail in things that if you were to label them as good or as bad, you wouldn't be able to see. Either because you're so much so in that state of excitement, or either because you're so much so even in your own thoughts, right? You will just miss it, right? But if I just experience life and see life truly for what it is, kind of almost similar to what I was saying in terms of before, just being present in my being present video, I can actually truly get the necessary feedback and information which I need to grow and mature. And really, I believe this is something which you can apply to any area of your life, right? Whether it even be with how you think and your thoughts, right? Because we understand that there's times I can even say for myself, sometimes thoughts literally just come out of nowhere, right? And we even take, for example, a thought of comparison. Maybe you're scrolling on your phone and you see, this person with this much money having this much success, and you're not really at the same stage. It can be so easy to just compare yourself to that person, right? So when this projected thought, because again, not all thoughts which we have actually even come from per se our own mind. Sometimes these can be thoughts from the desires of the flesh. These can be thoughts which the enemy even projects into us to cause us to believe, to internalize, and to not really become the person God has called us to be, right? So let's take this thought of comparison, right? It's not doing any good for us. It's not helping us, right? So this thought comes in, and what non-judgmental observation looks like is, okay, I've observed this thought. I can see it's a thought of comparison. It's not really a thought that I want. I acknowledge it. Avoiding it is pretending like it's not there. I acknowledge the fact that it's a real thought. It's a thought that's been presented to me. But non-judgmental observation looks like me not engaging with the thought, right? That's really what life is even about. It's the enemy is so much trying to, again, and this is kind of for believers, but is trying so much to grab your attention, to grab your focus and take it away from God, right? And even if you're not a believer, maybe it's to grab your attention, to grab your focus away from your purpose, away from who you are, and literally just to get you distracted, right? So many distractions in this world, right? But when I actually acknowledge this present distraction, which has been presented to me, I acknowledge it's real, I acknowledge it's there, but I'm just not going to engage with it. I'm just going to keep doing my thing, right? That's how I non judgmentally observe. That's how I grow. That's how I mature, right? And maybe you don't truly understand this whole thing of not engaging. An example I want to give you is even when I was younger, and maybe per se I wanted a toy from my mom in August or something. I'd continually tap my mom, tap my mom, tap my mom, and because I was so persistent, there were times where I would get it, and there were times where maybe she'd say no initially, but because of my persistence, she'd say, you know what, okay, just go and get one, right? And even the Bible talks about this very thing of persistence. But what non-judgmental observation looks like, again, in the case of my mom, and there were many times she'd actually do this. I'd be tapping and saying, "Hey, like, could you get me this toy? Could you get me this toy?" She's aware of the fact that I'm tapping her arm. It's not like she's avoiding it, pretending like it's not there. She's acknowledging it, but she understands the fact that the result which I want in terms of getting the toy isn't what she wants to give me, right? So she observes, she sees that I'm there, but she continues to do the very thing that she came to Argos for. And that's kind of what, with our thoughts and this whole thing of non-judgmental observation, that's what it looks like in our lives, right? It's knowing what to really engage with. It's knowing what to give your focus, time, and attention to. And some people might say that you could easily just say no to thoughts or no to things that you don't want to. Well, again, in the example I kind of gave, something that even happens with our thoughts sometimes is the fact that when we try and say no, and no is even a form of engagement. Let's say again, a thought of comparison comes and you're binding it in the name of Jesus and you're doing this and you're doing that, right? That's actually a good thing. You're casting down those thoughts that you don't want, that aren't in line on obedience to Christ, right? But something that can so much be the case is the fact that when it's thoughts that we don't want and we say no to them, they can almost get projected even more in our minds, right? Again, if even if you're not a believer, where there's thoughts that aren't beneficial for you, sometimes you find that when you say no and when you say no, it's like the thought still remains in your mind and you just don't even want it there. In me non-judgmentally observing the thought, I acknowledge it's there. I don't pretend like it's not there. I just don't give it the engagement of a yes or a no. It passes through, I observe it, I see what it is, and I don't engage, and it simply passes out, right? That's how we actually give our attention and our time to meaningful things. That's how we actually give our attention and our time to things which cause us to grow. And again, if I'm being honest, this is very much easier said than done. But I think it's so necessary for us to do because it's how we actually gain control over this thing of the mind, right? The mind is such a powerful thing. It really dictates how we actually live our life, right? It's done internally first before it's done externally, right? So when we actually know how to really gain mastery of the mind, right? And again, we're human. We have emotions, we have feelings. So when things are going good, naturally we're probably gonna feel happy. And if things aren't going well, naturally we might feel sad, right? But it's very much in line in terms of, again, mastery over the mind, emotional intelligence, and emotional mastery. And when we actually begin to have these things and begin to walk in these things, it's how we can actually overcome many of the things which we might even struggle with, many of the things which we go about in the world that can hold people in chains. But because we have this truth and we know this truth, we've been set free. Again, I appreciate you guys. Hope this video was able to be a blessing to you. See you guys in the next one. Take care.